Welcome back to another episode of Focus on EDU. I'm Doug Konopelko from CDW. Really excited for us to have this conversation today. Eric is back for a second time. This is Nicki's first time around on the show, but excited to have them on here. And we're going to be talking a little bit about personalized learning today. So let's kick it off by just saying, Nicki, Eric, give us a little bit about your background in education, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Yeah, great to be back, Doug. I'm a former science teacher, high school principal from New Jersey, and we were personalizing learning literally 15 years ago. And after we got a great deal of notoriety from the work of my teachers, I then transitioned to this role where I've been a glorified speaker, consultant, author, fill in the rest of the blanks for the last 10 years. And recently founded my own consultancy, Aspire Change EDU.
Hi, I'm Nicki, and I'm from West Haven, Utah. This is my 23rd year in education. I started off being a kindergarten, first, second, third grade teacher, and I absolutely loved it. I moved into an instructional coach role for 4 years, and then I've had 8 years as a secondary school principal. So throughout my journey, I've always focused on meeting the needs of all children, differentiating, and just doing things different. So just excited to be here.
Sounds good. Well, let's start where any good conversation around personalized learning would start, with a quick definition of, what do you see personalized learning as? Because I feel like in the spirit of things being personalized, that's one of those things where I'm sure there's a tried and true definition, but I feel like as we talk through this, right, it sounds different, looks different, feels different to different people that are involved in the education space.
Let's talk about first what it is not. Personalization is not about all students doing the same thing at the same time, the same way. It is not about putting them all on a device, having them use an adaptive learning tool where there's no talking and no discourse. As Nicki and I defined personalization, we were very careful with the definition to make sure that it aligns with you can personalize with or without technology. And our definition is simply this. Personalization is all learners getting what they need when and where they need it to learn. Can you use tech? Yes. Do you have to? No. But it's really contingent on all of these high agency strategies: voice, choice, path, pace, place, how we use data to group, regroup, target instruction, moving to competency-based approaches, which I'm sure Nicki's going to dive into because her school is not just a national, but a global leader in this, building relationships with students. So, we just want to make sure that everyone understands that when it comes to learning, there's not just one way. And that is something that Nicki and I both adamantly believe in.
I like it. Sounds good. So, Nicki, bring us to your work at the school, right? What does personalization mean to you in practice, like in the day-to-day of your work?
Well, basically, I just wanted to create my secondary setting to have the same environment that I had in my elementary setting 20 years ago, right? I wanted to move away from the teacher-centered approach, remove that teacher from the front of the room, and provide more opportunities for the teacher and the student to communicate, receive, and give feedback, and then just focus on learning versus just points or checking off boxes, right? So when you enter my school, if I was giving you a tour as we'd go in and out of the classrooms, you'd never be able to find the teacher because the teacher's either working one-on-one or small group with my students, or they'd be conferencing with them based off our proficiency skills. So we started with culture, changing the focus on having all of us be a team and focusing on relationships and connection year 1, and then year 2 forward, we dove in 100% and we created proficiency skills that are similar to rubrics. We dove into choosing power standards and identifying where all of our students were at and creating pathways for them. We really started looking at the verbs within the standard and wanted to create content that was aligned with the standards, right? And we wanted to have clarity for our students and have skills where students could identify what they're learning and why they're learning it, and then be able to tell us where they're at in the learning process. We wanted to have them self-reflect, self-assess, self-grade, just kind of put them in the driver's seat of education. So obviously it's hard to talk about in 2 minutes, but we started with proficiency skills and culture and just wanted to provide them a guide in how to learn and be more engaged in their learning.
I feel like a lot of folks would probably say, we do a lot with scales or we do a lot with the standards, right? But I think one of the important things that you said was about culture, right? So what are some of the things you do at your school, right? That within the culture, right, that help cultivate that culture that really help you be able to take the personalization to the next level, right? Because the culture becomes that foundation.
Well, when the teacher is talking at the students all day, they don't really have a lot of time to get to know the student as a person or as a learner, right? There's not a lot of time built in a traditional schedule where you and the student, have a lot of time to communicate. And so when you move to proficiency skills and you move to a feedback and conferencing approach versus just points and percentages and extra credit, then you actually have to build in time where you and the student have to sit down and go through their submissions and their work and base it off the proficiency scale and actually communicate and provide new strategies or reteach it a different way and be proactive in the learning process and just work one-on-one. Basically, you're personalizing the grading when you have proficiency skills. And that itself makes a culture where the teacher and the student are a team and the students feel safe to ask questions and know it's okay to fail because their teacher's right there for them.
And then I'll just add 4 more points to when we think about creating that culture that really not only creates, but sustains personalization. Number one is this sense of risk taking. Teachers, administrators have to have that autonomy to understand, to break away from that's the way we've always done it. We have to take some risks. Number two, creating the conditions for collaboration. People have to understand that, learning, leadership, growth is not a solo sport. Number three, Nicki talked about feedback. Teachers and administrators need ongoing, practical, timely feedback so they can build their confidence with personalization. And then finally, number four, professional learning. Professional learning, not professional development, which is something that's done to us. Not drive by, not one and done. Professional learning supported by research that is ongoing, job embedded, has lots of feedback. So 4 main things that I've not only seen in Nicki's school, but schools that have successfully personalized across the country and the world: risk-taking, collaboration, feedback, professional learning.
You mentioned before, Eric, and if I was a better producer, I could probably have these words pop up as we said them. But you said voice, choice, path, pace, place, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, of those 5, take us into, one of those. How does that impact personalization?
Yeah, and here's the thing, often it's the small shifts to practice that have the biggest impact. When people hear the word personalization, they think they have to just totally change what they're doing. So let's start with voice. Nicki and I believe that student voice is the gateway to personalization, and you can utilize voice during instruction. Voice is simply getting all kids involved. When we are reviewing prior learning, checking for understanding, or implementing closure, using individual whiteboards, dry erase surfaces, Post-it notes, or technology, simply getting all kids involved. But we have to move from instruction, what the teacher does, to learning, what the kids do. And that's where choice, path, pace, and place come in. Choice could be choosing the right tool for the right task. Choice could be choosing how to demonstrate understanding. Choice could be selecting differentiated tasks in a choice board or through a must-do, may-do format or a playlist. When we think about path and, one thing that why, Nicki and I are here together, how they're able to put students at Quest on their own path and work at their own pace. I've never seen anything like it. And when we think about learning is not linear. So when we think about path, we have to understand that to get kids to that demonstration of the standard, that mastery, they have to understand. We have to understand that kids have different learning preferences. When we talk about pace, if learning is the goal, students should be able to work at their own pace within reason. And finally, place. Place can be flexible seating. Place can be outside. place can be virtual. So looking at those high agency strategies, what we always try to tell administrators and teachers is focus on one high agency strategy in every lesson. It's not about doing all five.
Got it. Well, that sounds great. So, Nikki, when you walk into a classroom at your school, what you mentioned that sometimes it's hard to find the teacher, right? Because they're so involved with the kids and they're circulating and they're having those one-on-one conversations. But what else are things that kind of tip you off, right, as an administrator, as a site administrator, to go, okay, things are going well in here, right? Because I was a former assistant principal, did a ton of classroom walkthroughs and all of those things. And I feel like there is sometimes those little, sometimes even almost subconscious things that you walk into a room and you go, okay, this has like the right vibe, right, of what we're trying to go for in our classroom. So what does that look like?
So kind of depends on the subject. If I was to walk in, say, a history class or an art class, more of an elective or foundation class, there'd be a lot of choice that Eric was talking about. We allow students to choose how they want to learn. So they can choose if they want to learn with a teacher, if they want to learn listening to a podcast or watching a video that the teacher had created, or even reading articles and annotating, right? So we first let them choose how to learn. So I love walking in to see that students are doing what they want to do, which increases engagement, right? But not only do they get to choose how to learn, but they get to choose how to practice. So my teachers create a variety of ways. They're very innovative in providing some tech resources as well as hands-on, as well as, again, reading or picture books, So a variety of ways to practice. And again, I love walking in. We don't do a one-size-fits-all test. Students can prove how they want to show that they know the standards. So basically, they prove understanding. So some classes are a lot of choice and different things going on, and there's always collaboration. We only have tables. They do not have desks and rows. Where in other classes, it's more independent work where kids are on their own pathway. So you may see an 8th grader in an 11th grade math class based off where they're at from their benchmark. So we're constantly assessing them and checking for mastery and proficiency. We have very high standards at Quest, but we allow those students to prove proficiency at a faster rate versus make them sit in class and do the same task every day as everyone in the class. And then on the opposite end, it even helps on the support. I'm more of a quality over quantity person. I don't believe in brushing through all of my kids, say through all of the state standards. I would rather sit down and create a pathway on the standards to fill in the holes and gaps for my support kiddos, and then provide them additional support and longer time to reach mastery. So the kids on one end can fly and do multiple years, say, of math in 1 year. The other end, we provide additional support and resources for them. So that's a little bit of pace as well as choice. So it just depends the classroom you walk in.
Sounds good. Eric, when you move from working with different school districts, you talked about working with Nicki's school. I know you've worked with many others over the years. What are some of the things that like district level folks can do to help lay the foundation for their schools to make the decisions like Nicki's school is able to make?
I love that question. And I think it starts with questions. District building leaders should start by asking, why do we do things the way we do them? How might we do them better? And what tells us if we are successful? One of the main questions that I ask administrators when I visit classrooms, and I get to visit thousands of classrooms across the world every year, the main question I ask is, how do you know kids are learning? And we often want to talk about, it's tough to say that kids are learning if all students are doing the same thing at the same time, the same way. If it's sit and get, if it's direct instruction for the majority. The other thing that, that I empower administrators to really think about is, what evidence do they have that really validates or justifies the practices that they're using? And I tell them that, the biggest asset that their teachers possess is their ability to read the room. And as leaders, they have to be able to not only read the room, but provide feedback that is targeted, that is easily digestible. Teachers want to know, how can I do it? What can it look like? And the more that school leaders are able to ask the right questions, because questions are more important than answers. Questions lessen the, oh, well, this is a criticism of me, or they don't know what I'm doing. Leading with questions, but then providing those examples of what it could look like. Also, every school that has successfully personalized, whether it's Nicki's or other ones that I've had the honor of work with, it's the ability of the leaders to model expectations. They are rolling up their sleeves. They are facilitating professional learning. They are engaging those teachers in those conversations about what they can do to grow their practice. And I think the words we use as leaders is extremely important. Same thing as teachers. We want students to grow. We want educators to grow. So lead with questions, evidence, model, but most importantly, create that compelling culture that students and staff want to be a part of.
I
Sounds
think
great.
that's the main thing when I made the switch is, traditionally a lot of the teachers, they have their cliques or they stay in their classrooms at lunch. I just wanted an environment where we all have that. I identify all of the different strengths with all the teachers, right? I give the teachers voice and choice, just as I expect them to give the students voice and choice. And so once I started being more open like that, and they realized that I valued their opinion and treated them as professionals, and then I would highlight each other's strengths, then we became a team, right? And then if the teachers support each other and the students can see that, we're modeling from the top down. And so then it just creates an atmosphere where everyone's a team. But I think problem solving together, like you said, asking questions and allowing the teachers to be part of the process. I'm a firm believer that I'm in the trenches with the teacher all the time, right? I'm staying late. I'm helping them there where the magic happens, but I need to be available for them to brainstorm with. Same as I would want them to be with their students. So I do think leaders impact more than they know, and they need to be the energy they want to attract and just create an environment where all students are engaged. Back to your question you asked a minute ago, how do I know when I walk in? I look if they're compliant or engaged. That's all I have to do. It says it all. And so just create an environment that teachers are happy and students are engaged.
Yeah, I remember when we used to go in, you could always tell there's a difference between good noisy and bad noisy, right? And it's that idea of it's great when the kids are engaged in that discourse and they're debating something that's about the content, and you can tell that they're into it, right, and engaged. So I think it's really good point there, the difference between compliant and engaged. So you're both on here together for a reason, right? So we didn't talk about it yet, but you did write a book, Personalize. So maybe tell just a little bit about that as we get towards the end here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So after I was fortunate to coach at Nicki's school, I literally saw things that I've never seen. And I say this knowing that, hey, it can be taken out of context. However, the level of personalization that's happening at scale at her school, I've never seen that before. And I saw different aspects of personalization, but the one thing that we always preach is there isn't one right or best way to personalize. So I wanted to capture those elements of competency, of pace, of path, and combine it with some of the things that I had seen from my other schools. So that was the reason why after year one, we're like, hey, well, I said, Nicki, we need to write this book together because we feel it can inspire the masses. One of the things we also emphasize in the book is, what does sound pedagogy look like in a personalized environment? Whether it's rotational models where data is being used to group, regroup, target instruction, differentiate, choice activities that are scaffolded tasks where the teacher is then pulling individual learners for targeted one-on-one support, playlists where kids get to choose the order of their tasks, flipped lessons where they're watching mini recordings, and then the teacher is maximizing that time in class. We also dive into one of the most common means of personalize where there's opportunities to grow, and that's co-teaching. When we look at our students who learn differently, Nicki and I really wanted to help people understand, how can we implement effective co-teaching models? How can we provide appropriate interventions that don't produce a stigma where kids think that they're not smart. And then just looking at the whole relational aspect, and whether it's connecting to research, the practicality of the examples from an array of schools, districts, inspiring stories. Our goal was to present personalization as not another thing, but something that we can grow in, or a natural extension to our current practice.
It really is just using best practice. I feel like once they read the book, they'll realize it's what they believe in, and it really will align with their why they went into education, because it's not something new, like Eric said. It's truly just meeting the needs of all learners.
Well, I love it. Thank you both for being here, for taking some time out of your very busy schedules to tell your stories, tell a little bit about your work with us.
Pleasure to be here, Doug.
Welcome.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can be notified whenever we post new content. Looking forward to seeing you next time.